I just got back from my round two game of the Abu Dhabi Masters Tournament, and it was a really fun one. I played an opening I've never played before. Now, I should note that it's currently 1:20 p.m. in Abu Dhabi. Next round starts at 6 p.m., so I could probably spend like hours talking about this game, but I'll try and keep this brief and share some of the key moments. So I was playing FM from India, Vatsal Singahania. And I had a little bit of time to prepare before the game. I knew that he plays Open Sicilian, and I decided that I would play a line that I've just never played before, the classical Sicilian. Never played this in tournament play. I played this because I knew that he could probably expect either like a dragon or Dragendorf or Taimanov or Accelerated Dragon. And then he actually told me after the game that he was preparing Stafford Gambit this morning. So it was nice to play something that would catch him perhaps a little bit off guard. Now, the move I was expecting here was Bishop E2, which I found that he's played a bunch online and a few times in tournament play as well. But he played the move Bishop G5, which is the critical main line. And even though this wasn't the primary move I was expecting, I had checked this before the game because I did find one game he had played last year in tournament play with this line. And I decided to go for a pretty rare and kind of dubious, tricky variation, maybe in the same spirit as a Stafford, but perhaps a little bit less dubious. It's to start with Bishop D7. The main move by far is E6, but the point of Bishop D7 is after Queen D2, Black very quickly develops on the queen side, and then there's an idea to take on D4, Queen D4, and Queen A5. And I discovered this maybe about a month ago, and in preparation for the tournament, I had looked into this line thinking that would be a kind of a cool surprise weapon, and it was nice to get it in an actual game. Now, the point of Queen A5 is to, of course, attack the bishop, but also pressure various targets on the queen side. And here my opponent plays F4, which is most natural by far, defending the bishop, preparing E5 ideas. And then I unleash the move Rook takes C3, which is still preparation for me. And if we look in the Masters database, we'll find a good handful of games. Pretty sure Richard Laporte has been the main player who's played this, but maybe these games, I don't think the database is updated because Laporte has definitely played this in like recent months or recent years. But the point of Rook C3 is just to sack the exchange and target the E4 pawn. And the line ends up being pretty concrete after pawn takes C3. Now, I should mention if queen takes C3, I can take, and take on E4. I think this is already very nice for black, hitting C3, threatening the fork, hitting the bishop as well. So instead, my opponent took with the pawn, and now I have E5. And this is all still prep. And we can see by the timestamps, I really wasn't spending too much time in the opening. More time than I started with because we do have the 30-second increment. My opponent spent about 8 minutes till this point. And after E5, he took about 40 minutes to play the move Queen D3. So it's a very long think. And I was still in preparation, so while he was thinking, I was just kind of walking around looking at other games. Because this exact position was on my computer about half hour before the round. And I will say the main move and the best move here is Queen B4. And if we just toggle on the engine, this is a dubious line for black. Like, engine will give +1 about for white. But I think on a practical level, especially if white's not prepared, there's still a lot of interesting chances for black. And I'll just share just a kind of tidbit of my preparation. I was planning to take. And after bishop to H4, my prep would continue. G5, hitting the bishop, deflecting the pawn, and then bishop E7 is a nice move. And my prep actually kept going here. The main line I was looking at is bishop C4, H6, hitting the pawn, taking advantage of the fact the pawn is pinned. And after rook HF1, I was planning to castle here. I guess there's one game prior. White is still considered better here, but I think there's decent counterplay for black being down in the exchange. So my opponent did not go into this, but rather played queen d3, which I had very, very briefly looked at before the game, and I knew this is a playable move. And the only thing I knew about this move is the engine will suggest knight g4. So I played knight g4 pretty quickly, and then my opponent played queen g3, and here I was basically on my own, but I had a pretty good sense of what was going on, just given the potential tactics in the position. Of course, I'd like to try and achieve knight f2 and win back some material, but there's also still a lot of juicy targets on the queen side. And I spent a lot of time here trying to figure out the best approach, because there's a lot of candidate moves for black. Like queen a2, queen a3, queen c5, queen b6, even h6. All of these moves were on my radar. And I'm going to disable engine analysis until maybe a little bit later. But the move I ended up choosing was queen b6, which I thought was one of the most direct moves, simply threatening knight f2, also targeting just the weak dark squares in white's territory. And here my opponent played bishop d3 and actually gave back material. I play h6 and f5. So I should kind of explain the what's going on here, because after h6, the bishop should not move to h4 because I can take. And if queen takes, there's g5, and then this is actually like really, really nice for black. I'd be getting 2 minor pieces for a rook. And yeah, if the queen doesn't take on f4 and queen f3 is played, then g5 comes, bishop g7. This would also be nice for black. So f5 was a nice resource, essentially cutting off my bishop from defending the knight, and just ignoring the bishop on g5. So it creates a situation where I could take the bishop, but then queen takes g4, and white's still up the exchange, and white should be doing very fine here. Now, the drawback of f5 is I can still win back material with knight f2. And essentially, we got to a position after bishop e3. It's very important I have knight takes h1, attacking the queen, so I'm not losing material. Rook takes h1, and queen c7. Got to this position where the dust has kind of settled, and we went from like a really chaotic situation to a way more positional game that's equal material and very much imbalanced just in terms of the structure, because white does have kind of the weak double c pawns, but at the same time, I'm very much underdeveloped, and I'm a little bit stuck on the king side because the queen is constantly eyeing the g7 pawn, which makes it very difficult to develop the bishop and castle. Now, I was okay reaching this position because even though I'm a little bit stuck, a little bit passive, I'm also really solid, and it's hard for white to actually crack the position, and I have some initiative threatening the pawn on c3. So my opponent played king d2. Now, if I'm not mistaken, there was a funny line if king b2, which also looks natural. I was looking at d5 takes and then bishop a3 check, which I thought would be pretty cool, because king takes a3, queen c3 is mate. And yeah, there were some other funny lines, like if king b3, yeah, it seems like the white king is going to regret its life decisions here. So king d2, much more solid, and I play bishop c6, so just improving the bishop. Now the e4 pawn is somewhat of a long-term target in white's position, because the f5 pawn is a bit overextended. This pawn has to constantly be babysitted by either the bishop or the queen. So I was feeling pretty good here. After rook b1, I played pawn a6, ensuring there's no bishop takes a7, also preventing any bishop b5 potential. And here my opponent played h4, which I think is a reasonable move. There's some plans of later playing like queen f3, g4, g5. And here I realized there's not really too many options for black, just because, yeah, my bishop is still stuck. And I decided to go for a double-edged move, which I think in hindsight is the right approach, is to play pawn d5. And even though I'm opening the center and I'm a little bit underdeveloped, I should say, White's king is also in the center. So d5 just creates a situation where there's going to be a bit more sharp play for both sides. And I also attacked the e-pawn, so White doesn't have too many choices here. He took, I took, and then c4 was played, so making my bishop retreat, and then bishop b6. And even though it looks like White has some nice initiative, and I'm kind of getting kicked around here, I'm still very much holding on. And after c5, queen d5, I think something has already gone wrong for White. Just because the bishop is a bit out of play, I have nice center, queen is aligned with the king, c5 is now just a liability for White. And from here, we're going to see that White's position is really hard to hold on to. As we'll see in the game, rook e1, attacking the pawn, simply play f6, and now my e5 pawn, my whole structure is very solid. And I wasn't too concerned about queen g6 here. I could play queen f7, but yeah, during the game I was thinking even king d7 is a nice move, because the queen can't really infiltrate, and I am threatening to take the pawn on g2. So instead, my opponent played king c3, which was a big surprise for me, and this just turns out to be a losing move. I think king c3 was maybe caused by time pressure. My opponent was already falling below 6 minutes. So I'm not sure what else White could have done. I think after the game, he had mentioned some kind of rook e4 idea, but just to show the finish, king c3, things just crumble really quickly for White. I take on c5, and the key is that after queen takes g7, I have the simple rook g8. Rook is defended by the queen, White's bishop is still hanging, but more importantly, after queen takes f6, I don't take the bishop because then I lose e5 and my queen, but here I just have a mating net with queen d4, and my opponent resigned in this position. Now during the game, I was trying to calculate force mate. It seemed like there were a lot of winning options, but I'm pretty sure this is force mate, because if king b3, bishop a4 is checkmate, and if king d2, I have rook g2. King goes back, I would have queen a1 mate, and if rook e2, I was looking at bishop here, c3 takes king c2, bishop a4, and wherever the king goes, I have rook g1 and the eventual back rank checkmate. So I think overall it was a nice game. It was nice to use a somewhat tricky, offbeat, maybe slightly dubious opening, but just given the surprise value and given my opponent wasn't so well prepared, I think it worked out. Now, it seemed like White was fine in the middle game, but I think because I had the nice time advantage and just perhaps a slightly easier position to play, yeah, things just worked out for me. So real quick, I'm going to check a few moments with the engine. Oh, wow, this is mate in 5. Was there a quicker mate? Queen d4, king d2. Oh, bishop e4 is even quicker. Force a king somewhere and then take. Okay, so at this point, I was already winning. I want to go back to the moment where queen g3 was played. So it's not winning by any means for black at this point. Apparently the engine wants h6. I didn't play h6 in the game because bishop e2, hg5, bishop takes g4. I considered this line in the game, but I thought after bishop d7, I'm still down the exchange and my king looks awkward. But I guess my pawns are still strong. So this could have been an interesting line. Oh, maybe at some point White could have been better. I mean, it was very messy position. And if we go forward here, so White was slightly better. Oh, White's still slightly better. But yeah, I think bishop b6 and c5 is probably the downfall for White. But it's still equal. Oh, wow. So king c3 was just the game-losing blunder. Now, I was already feeling comfortable at this point. But I guess, yeah, white should have gone for queen g6, king d7, and the game just goes on, rook d1, and yeah, it's still probably a position where anything can happen. So, all right, well, I guess I'm fortunate to receive the gift of king c3. And yeah, I should probably go find some food and take a nap before the next round. So thanks everyone for watching. I appreciate all the positive comments and feedback on the first round video. Stay tuned for more chess. And if you have any questions about this game, leave them below. All right, see you guys.